Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes complex stories, really intricate puzzles, and, well, we dive deep, try to get to the heart of what makes them tick.
And today, oh boy, have we got a puzzle for you. We're tackling a case that, honestly, set the blueprint for a whole genre. When this story came out, it wasn't just a mystery. People saw it as this profound challenge to logic itself.
We are talking about the infamous Mystery of the Yellow Room, happened at the Chateau du Glandier. Our sources, they call it a case that taxed the conscience of our judges. I mean, think about that phrasing. It wasn't just a crime. It rattled the legal system, fascinated continents.
Europe, America, everyone was obsessed. Because the core problem, the mission for us today, seems simple on the surface, but it just breaks your brain when you dig in.
Exactly. How did an assassin get into a room, the Yellow Room, attack someone, and then get out again, when that room was, for all intents and purposes, hermetically sealed?
Yeah, you heard that right. The door, locked and bolted from the inside. The windows, barred. Solid iron shutters, also fastened from the inside. No chimney, no trapdoors, nothing.
It was so baffling that the initial reaction from police, from everyone who saw it, was basically magic.
Pretty much. The sources say people were seriously concluding we shall really have to believe in the devil. That's how impossible it seemed.
But that's why we're diving in, right? Because amidst all that "it must be supernatural" talk, two minds refused to accept it. They believed logic had to hold.
Let's introduce the players. First, the victim, Mademoiselle Stangerson, and her father, the famous scientist, Professor Stangerson.
Key figures. And then the investigators, the real stars of the logical showdown. You've got Frederic Larsan. Think of him as the seasoned pro, the head honcho detective from the Sûreté, the French secret police. He's got this huge reputation, solved big cases. He's the establishment. And squaring off against him, this young guy, Joseph Rouletabille, just 18, a junior reporter, but already getting known for just like insane deductive skills, a real prodigy. His nickname, Rouletabille, kind of means roll thy ball. Like he just keeps pushing until he gets the truth.
So yeah, you've got the impossible crime, the high stakes, and these two brilliant clashing minds. It's going to be good.
Okay, so before we get to the how of the crime, we need to understand the where and the who. Because the location, the context, it's not just background noise. It's absolutely critical to the whole setup.
Definitely. This didn't happen on a busy street corner. The Château du Glandier. It's near Épinay-sur-Orge, right on the edge of the Saint-Geneviève forest. It's described as known for its solitude, deliberately isolated.
And they needed that isolation, didn't they, for their work?
Precisely. The Stangersons, father and daughter, were deep into some pretty heavy scientific research. That solitude was a requirement.
And the crime scene itself, the Yellow Room, wasn't even in the main chateau.
Nope. It was in a separate building, a pavilion, maybe 400 yards away. Self-contained, laboratory, the Yellow Room where Mademoiselle Stangerson slept, and an adjoining room for the professor. Even more isolated within the isolation, perfect for focused work, and, well, perfect for trapping someone.
So who were these people locked away in this scientific fortress? Professor Stangerson, he was a big deal.
Oh, huge. A celebrated scientist, American-born but French. Came back to France with a lot of money. And his research, wow. He was working on the dissociation of matter by electric action.
Sounds intense.
It was revolutionary stuff. Our sources say it was expected to shake the foundation of orthodox science. Think about that. His earlier work was even linked conceptually to the discovery of radium. So massive scientific and probably financial stakes involved here.
And his daughter, Mathilde Stangerson, she wasn't just living there, she was part of the work.
Absolutely integral. 20 years old, described as beautiful, incredibly devoted to her father and the science. She was apparently instrumental in their experiments. It was her pushing for that solitude, reportedly saying, where could we work better than in this solitude?
But that level of isolation, it must have had a personal cost, right? 15 years, the sources say, of extreme seclusion.
Yeah, deliberately avoiding suitors, distractions, everything, just total focus. Which makes the timing, the pre-crime atmosphere, so interesting.
Because something changed, didn't it? Right before the attack.
Exactly. Suddenly, weeks before, there's this sensational news report, almost unbelievable, given her history. Mademoiselle Stangerson had agreed to marry someone. The isolation was about to end.
And the fiancé?
And Robert Darzac, professor of physics at the Sorbonne, about 40, known as the perpetual fiancé because he'd apparently been courting her for 7 years. He was already close to the family, professionally and personally.
So you have this long-term, intense scientific seclusion, suddenly broken by the prospect of marriage to this long-standing suitor. That definitely creates, well, a lot of potential motive, doesn't it? Not necessarily about money, maybe something much more personal.
Precisely. A huge shift in the dynamics of that isolated little world. The tension must have been immense.
Let's get into the night itself, October 25th, 1892. How do things unfold? We have a key witness, right? Old Jacques.
Yes, old Jacques. He's the trusted family servant, lived right there in the attic of the pavilion, so he's as close as you could get. His account is crucial for the timeline.
So what does he tell us? The evening starts normally.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Mademoiselle Mathilde was working late with her father in the lab, probably until around 11:30 p.m.
Okay.
Then, right at midnight, the cuckoo clock strikes. She does her usual routine, kisses her father goodnight in the lab, says goodnight to Jacques, and then she goes into the yellow room.
And this is key. She locks herself in.
Meticulously, double locks the door, and bolts it. Strongly bolted, the reports emphasize. She secured that room herself from the inside. No question about that.
But she was uneasy. There was something about a beast.
Yeah, it's a strange little detail. She apparently told Jacques she was afraid of the good Lord's beast. Local lore, according to the innkeeper anyway, linked this to a specific cat, Mother Agenu's cat, known for this eerie cry.
Huh. So maybe just local superstition, or maybe she genuinely felt something was wrong.
Hard to say. But it adds this layer of dread right before she seals herself in. Meanwhile, Professor Stangerson and Jacques, they stay in the lab next door, cleaning up, maybe discussing the work.
And they were quiet during this period.
Apparently so, not moving around much, which, as you hinted, Rouletabille later picks up on. He wonders if the assassin, perhaps hiding somewhere, might have thought the lab was empty, that the men had left the pavilion.
Okay, so Mademoiselle Stangerson is locked in her room. The professor and Jacques are quiet next door. Then what happens?
Around 12:30, chaos. A fearful scream erupts in the yellow room. Murder! Murder! Help!
Just blood-curdling.
And it wasn't just the scream. Immediately after, they hear 2 revolver shots. Bang! And then the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle, furniture crashing, things being thrown around. The attacker's clearly still in there with her.
Oh, my God.
Then one more cry. Murder! Help! Father! Father!
So Stangerson and Jacques, they must have rushed the door.
Instantly. They sprang for it,
Yeah.
but it's locked and bolted. They throw themselves against it, but it holds. They can hear the violence continuing just feet away, and they're blocked by the very security Mademoiselle Stangerson put in place.
The horror of that moment, unimaginable. So they couldn't break it down alone.
No, the door was solid oak. It took what the reports call frenzied efforts. They needed help. The concierge, Bernier, and his wife rushed over from the main gate, and together, finally, with combined force, they managed to burst the door open.
Burst it inward, right?
Yeah.
Which proves.
Exactly. Okay. Proves the bolt had been thrown from inside, the room was secured from within, they smashed their way in, expecting to confront the killer.
Yeah.
And he's gone. Vanished. The room is wrecked. The victim is dying. But the assassin is simply not there. The impossible crime is now reality.
So they finally break down the door, they pour into the yellow room. What do they actually find? The scene must have been just chaotic.
Utterly bewildering. You've got the immediate horror and then this creeping sense of impossibility. First, Mademoiselle Stangerson. She's on the floor, described as in the agonies of death, still in her nightdress, clearly dragged from her bed during the struggle.
How badly injured was she?
Critically, terrible fingernail marks on her throat. The strangulation attempt was brutal. The doctor later said if it had lasted just seconds longer, she'd have died right there from that alone.
But there was another injury, too.
Yes, a serious wound on her right temple. It was bleeding heavily, forming a small pool on the floor. Serious, but ultimately not the fatal blow, though it clearly knocked her out or incapacitated her. The combination showed this frenzied, violent attack.
And what about signs of the attacker? The person who wasn't there anymore?
Oh, plenty of signs that he'd been there. The room was like a map of the struggle. Most striking were these blood-stained marks of a man's large hand, a red hand, suggesting maybe paint or dye mixed with blood, smeared on the walls and near the door.
Weird. A red hand.
Yeah, odd detail. Plus, traces of sooty stuff, like impressions left by dirty hands or clothes.
And physical evidence. Things left behind.
Definitely. A large handkerchief, soaked in blood, but frustratingly, no initials. An old rough-looking cap. And footprints. Fresh footprints of a man with large feet, wearing boots whose soles left that same sort of sooty impression.
So the attacker was messy, left tracks, dropped things, and the gun, the revolver they heard.
Found on the floor, yes. And quickly identified it belonged to old Jacques, the servant.
Wait, the servant's gun?
Yes. Jacques confirmed it. He kept it locked away in his attic room.
Wow.
The implication is chilling. The assassin knew the layout of the pavilion, knew where to find a weapon, and had the time and opportunity to get it beforehand. This wasn't just a random break-in. And 2 shots had definitely been fired from it.
Okay, so victim, signs of struggle, clues about the attacker.
Yeah.
We'll keep coming back to the room itself. How did he get out? They checked everything.
Meticulously. This is the core of the whole impossibility. The door, forced inward, proved it was bolted from inside. The windows, they were huge, yes, but covered by iron bars. Solid bars.
Okay.
And behind the bars, solid iron shutters. And crucially, those shutters were fastened from the inside. They were checked, they were intact, untampered with.
What about, like, secret passages, a hidden door, a big chimney?
Nope. The police sounded the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Nothing. No hidden panels, no traps, no way in or out that wasn't accounted for and secured from within. The official conclusion was stark. The room was securely closed in every way.
The attacker was there, the evidence proves it. The room was sealed, the evidence proves that too.
And yet, he vanished. It's the perfect, infuriating paradox. No wonder the press immediately jumped on the supernatural crime angle. What else could it be?
Okay, when things seem supernatural, you need logic. And this case brought in 2 heavy hitters, 2 very different kinds of logical minds. We mentioned them earlier. Frederic Larsan and Joseph Rouletabille.
Right, the establishment versus the prodigy. Larsan is the picture of official authority, head of the Sûreté, the secret police. He's famous. Solved the big gold ingots of the Paris Mint case. They pull him back from London specifically for this. Everyone expects him to crack it, quick.
And does he have an initial theory?
Oh, yeah. Immediate, decisive, almost instinctive. For Larsan, if the room is physically impossible to escape, then the people already there must be involved. His finger points straight at old Jacques and the concierges, Bernier and his wife.
He thinks they were accomplices, helping the killer.
That was his first gut reaction. He actually had them arrested within about half an hour of arriving on the scene.
Wow, fast.
Yeah. He later kind of nuanced it, claiming he didn't arrest them for the crime, just for being abroad at midnight, which sounds a bit like covering his bases. But his core belief, at least initially, seemed to be that the solution had to lie with the people closest to the scene. Importantly, though, he later becomes convinced there were no external accomplices helping with the escape itself.
Okay, so that's Larsan. Focus on the immediate physical reality. Suspect the locals. Now, what about Rouletabille, the young reporter kid?
Rouletabille is the opposite approach. He's barely 18, works for the newspaper L'Epoque, but he's already got this reputation. Solved a grisly case, the Rue Oberkampf affair, by figuring out the victim's missing foot was down a sewer drain. He doesn't care about police procedure. He just observes and deduces, relentlessly.
And his take on the Yellow Room. Does he buy the devil theory?
Not for a second. He dismisses the supernatural stuff immediately. He goes straight for the physical evidence, but interprets it totally differently than Larsan or the police. He focuses on that bloody handprint on the wall and the revolver found on the floor.
And what does he make of them?
Here's his first big logical leap. He insists the revolver was not used by the assassin to attack Mademoiselle Stangerson.
Wait, what? They heard 2 shots. Jacques' gun was found. How could it not be the attacker's weapon?
Rouletabille's reasoning is brilliant. He points to the struggle, the handprint. He argues the blood on the wall proves the assassin was wounded, specifically in the hand. If the assassin was wounded early in the fight,
Then maybe Mademoiselle Stangerson shot him.
exactly. Rouletabille posits she grabbed the gun, maybe it was hers originally, or she got it during the struggle and fired, hitting the attacker in the hand.
Okay, that explains the bloody handprint on the wall. He staggers back, wounded.
Precisely. The shock of being shot makes him stumble, maybe drop or lose his grip on whatever primary weapon he intended to use. He instinctively slaps his bleeding hand on the wall. And because his hand is now injured, and maybe he's lost his main weapon or needs silence, he resorts to a different silent weapon for the blow to the temple, like a heavy object, a life preserver, a hammer.
Wow. Okay, that completely reframes the sequence of events. The victim fought back, wounded the attacker, and that dictated the rest of the attack and maybe the escape.
It's a crucial insight, because a wounded assassin changes everything about how they might escape, especially from a supposedly sealed room.
Meanwhile, while these 2 are having their intellectual battle, who's officially in charge?
That would be Monsieur de Marquet, the examining magistrate. The sources paint him as, well, a bit theatrical, an amateur of dramatic arts. He seems almost more fascinated by the impossibility of the puzzle than determined to solve it quickly. Like he enjoys the mystery itself.
And let's not forget the fiancé, M. Robert Darzac. He must be devastated. How does he fit into these early theories?
He's a figure of intense interest, especially for Rouletabille. His despair seems genuine, boundless. But Rouletabille notes this weird contradiction. The clues left behind the rough cap, the sooty boot marks, they scream, common thug. Yet Rouletabille feels they point towards a well-connected person, which Darzac, the Sorbonne professor, definitely is.
So suspicion hangs in the air, even if it's unspoken. Does Darzac suspect anyone?
He vehemently denies any suspicion of old Jacques, for what it's worth. But yeah, he's right there in the middle of this tangled web of science, love, and impossible violence.
Rouletabille's focus on the details of the attack, not just the escape, seems key. He's trying to reconstruct the violence second by second. What other clues does he dig into?
Right. He understands that the how of the attack informs the how of the escape. This leads him to some really specific, almost bizarre lines of questioning, like Mademoiselle Stankerson's hair.
Her hair. How is that relevant?
He presses Monsieur de Marquet, the magistrate, on how she wore her hair that night. The answer comes back, drawn up in a knot on top of her head.
Okay. And why does Rouletabille care?
This is pure Rouletabille logic. He points out that if she'd worn her hair differently, specifically low over her ears in a style called bandeau, that thick padding of hair might have cushioned the blow to her temple.
So the fact it wasn't cushioned tells him something about the force needed, or the attacker's aim.
Exactly. He thinks this detail is highly important. It suggests the attacker knew precisely where and how hard to strike with that second weapon to ensure incapacitation, even without the hair providing any buffer. It speaks to intent, maybe even skill.
Speaking of that second weapon, it wasn't just a random club, was it? There was something specific, something Mr. de Marquet was being cagey about.
Yes, the magistrate was kind of milking the mystery of it. But finally, it's M. Robert Darzac, the fiancé, in his distress, who reveals what it was.
And what was the weapon?
A sheep's bone.
A sheep's bone? Seriously?
Sounds almost primitive, right? But Rouletabille immediately recognizes its significance. He calls it a frightful weapon. Apparently, a prepared sheep's bone, maybe weighted or sharpened, was known in certain circles as a tool for schooled assassins. It's silent, brutally effective, and crucially hard to trace compared to a manufactured weapon like a gun or knife.
And they found it?
Yes, near the bed. It had blood on the joint, and the shape apparently fit the temple wound perfectly. This unique, almost archaic weapon, it really deepens the mystery. It doesn't fit the profile of a simple burglary gone wrong.
Okay, weapon identified, injury analyzed, but still the escape. Did anyone have a plausible theory besides magic?
Well, Monsieur de Marquet, the magistrate, became fixated on the vestibule window. This was a window in the little entrance hall of the pavilion, not the Yellow Room itself.
And it was different how?
It wasn't barred like the Yellow Room windows. It opened onto the park. However, it did have those solid iron shutters fastened from the inside, just like the ones in the Yellow Room.
So still secured from inside. Why did he think the attacker used it?
Because they found traces of blood near it, similar footprints to those of the Yellow Room, and this strange description of an impression like a shadow passing across the shutters. Marquet desperately wanted this to be the escape route.
But Rouletabille saw the flaw immediately, right?
Instantly. If the assassin went out that window, how were the solid iron shutters refastened from the inside? It's the same problem as the Yellow Room door, just shifted one room over. It absolutely requires an accomplice on the outside to close and latch them.
And Larsan, the other detective, he was insisting there were no accomplices involved in the escape itself.
Exactly. Larsan's view directly contradicts the vestibule window theory if you assume no accomplices. Rouletabille checks other options too. Climbs up, looks at the skylight above the Yellow Room in the attic. Barred, intact, no escape there. He maintains the vestibule window might have been used, but the how of resecuring it remains the absolute sticking point.
And adding to the confusion, there were issues with the evidence gathering itself. Something about footprints in the vestibule.
Yeah, a really troubling inconsistency. Old Jacques swears he washed the vestibule floor the day after the crime and saw clear, dirty boot marks then. But later, the magistrate finds marks made on white paper he placed on the floor, specifically to capture prints.
So, were the original prints washed away? Or were new prints made later? Or was someone messing with the scene?
It's unclear, but it suggests either terrible procedure or deliberate manipulation right at the start. Rouletabille, doing his own tracking outside, finds prints suggesting the assassin actually got into the pavilion grounds earlier that afternoon, maybe hiding in the bushes near the path, which supports the idea of premeditation, of lying in wait.
The whole thing just gets muddier and muddier.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the climax of the initial investigation, really. It all comes down to the footprints outside the pavilion and the incredible deductive duel between Larsan and Rouletabille over what they mean.
So Rouletabille is tracking the killer's path away from the pavilion.
Yes, he follows those distinctive, large, rough, hobnailed boot prints, the same sooty ones found inside the yellow room. The trail leads away from the door, through the grounds, towards the edge of a lake or marshy area.
And that's where things get weird.
That's where they get fascinating. Right near the wet ground by the lake, Rouletabille finds two sets of prints subtly converging. You have the ongoing trail of the big, rough assassin's boots, and appearing right alongside them, marks from smaller, much more elegant boots.
Elegant boots. Like dress shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. The trail of the rough hobnailed boots just stops, dead ends, right where they meet the elegant prints.
Okay. What does Rouletabille make of that?
His deduction is swift. The assassin in the rough boots must have had an accomplice waiting, wearing the elegant boots. And that accomplice brought transport, specifically a bicycle.
A bicycle.
Yeah. Rouletabille theorizes the assassin, wounded, clumsy in those big boots, simply got on the bicycle brought by the accomplice. That's why the heavy boot prints vanish on the soft ground he's no longer walking. The elegant boots belong to the helper who facilitated the getaway vehicle.
That makes a certain kind of sense.
Yeah.
But Larsan doesn't buy it?
Not at all. Larsan watches Rouletabille lay this out and challenges him fiercely. He disputes the whole bicycle idea. He also pushes back on Rouletabille's interpretation of the wound evidence, arguing the blood found wasn't enough to indicate a serious injury, maybe just drips. He basically accuses Rouletabille of twisting logic to fit a cool theory. You can feel the professional rivalry there.
So what's Larsan's alternative explanation for the two sets of prints?
This is where Larsan shows his own brand of cunning. He comes back with his brilliant counter-theory designed to eliminate the need for any accomplice.
Okay, let's hear it.
Larsan suggests the assassin himself wore both pairs of boots. He wore the large, rough, hobnailed boots over his own smaller, elegant boots.
Like a disguise.
Exactly. To deliberately mislead the police, create the impression of a common ruffian. Then, when he reached the rendezvous point by the lake, he simply took off the outer, muddy, hobnailed boots, revealing his own fancy footwear underneath. He then hopped on the bicycle, which Larsan concedes might have been stashed there earlier by the assassin himself, and rode away alone.
Wow. Okay, that explains both sets of prints appearing and one disappearing, all with just one person. That's clever. Devious, even.
It's a masterclass in potential criminal misdirection. It seems to solve the footprint paradox neatly.
But Rouletabille, he doesn't just accept Larsan's theory, does he? He turns it around somehow.
He does something extraordinary. He takes Larsan's compelling boots over boots theory and uses it to point the finger directly at M. Robert Darzac, the fiancé.
How?
Because Rouletabille, ever the meticulous observer, had secretly made a paper outline, a pattern, of the soles of Darzac's own elegant boots. And guess what?
It matched the elegant prints found by the lake?
A perfect match.
Yeah.
To the elegant prints that Larsan himself argued belonged to the escaping assassin.
Oh, man. The confrontation must have been intense.
Peak drama. Rouletabille confronts Darzac, shows him the paper pattern matching the print. Darzac sees it, sees the implication that his boot print is right there at the escape point, and he turns ghastly pale, scares in horror, and literally collapses.
Case closed, surely. The fiancé did it. He wore decoy boots, attacked Mademoiselle Stangerson, escaped on a bike, and Rouletabille proved it.
That's what anyone watching would assume. The evidence seems overwhelming, confirmed by Darzac's own reaction. But then Rouletabille does the most unexpected thing. Right after Darzac collapses, Rouletabille looks at him and declares, loud enough for others to hear, "Yet I believe M. Darzac to be an honest man."
What? Why? He just presented damning evidence. Why would he undercut his own finding like that? Is he protecting Darzac? Or has he seen something even deeper? Something that explains the matched print without Darzac being the killer?
That's the million-franc question, isn't it? It throws the entire investigation into chaos again. Rouletabille seems to hold the key, but refuses to turn it.
So, if Rouletabille believes Darzac is innocent, despite the footprint evidence, the focus has to shift again, right? Away from just the physical how and back to the why. What was really going on with Mademoiselle Stangerson?
Exactly, and that's when the big boss, M. Dax, the chief of the Circe himself, gets more involved. His focus is less on the locked room mechanics and more on motive, psychology, the human element.
And Professor Stangerson, the father, he finally reveals something crucial about his daughter's state of mind just before the attack.
Yes, this is huge. He tells the investigators that only 2 days before the crime, Mademoiselle Stangerson has suddenly, inexplicably, told him she would never marry M. Robert Darzac.
Never marry him. After 7 years of courtship, after just recently agreeing, why?
That's the mystery. The reason she gave her father was, well, frankly bizarre. She reportedly said she was now too old to marry, that she had waited too long.
Too old. At 20. That makes no sense.
None at all.
Yeah.
Sounds like an excuse, right? A deflection. It strongly suggests there was some other, much deeper reason, a secret, maybe a past trauma, or some present circumstance that suddenly made marriage to Darzac impossible for her. Something powerful enough to make her reverse this life-changing decision, something maybe worth protecting even at great risk.
Could that secret be the motive for the attack? Someone trying to prevent the marriage or silence her, or maybe something related to Darzac himself?
All possibilities are on the table. It throws the entire relationship dynamic into question.
Now, Rouletabille, being Rouletabille, he doesn't just focus on the emotional motive. He also throws another potential motive into the mix, something more practical.
Right. He needs to explain how the assassin got into the pavilion and the yellow room in the first place, before it was locked. So he introduces the idea of robbery as a potential secondary motive, or perhaps a cover story.
Robbery. How does that fit?
He points back to some evidence found in the lavatory, not the yellow room, but another small room in the pavilion. He mentions finding those heavy boot prints next to the faint impression of where a parcel might have rested on the dusty floor.
A parcel, like stolen goods.
That's Rouletabille's speculation. Maybe the assassin wasn't primarily there to attack Mademoiselle Stangerson. Maybe he entered the pavilion earlier in the afternoon, which Rouletabille's tracking supports, intending to steal something valuable, perhaps securities or scientific papers related to the professor's work. He hides the loot, the parcel, in the lavatory.
And then he hides himself.
Exactly. Slips into the yellow room sometime before Mademoiselle Stangerson comes to bed, maybe hiding under the bed or in a closet while the room is being aired out or prepared for the night.
Okay, that solves the entry problem. The assassin was inside before she locked and bolted the door.
It's a plausible scenario for entry, but it doesn't solve the escape, especially as Rouletabille insists, the assassin was wounded during the confrontation.
So how does Larsan, the official detective, finally try to explain the escape, knowing all these conflicting pieces?
Larsan's really struggling by this point, trying to reconcile the physical impossibility with the evidence. He revisits the vestibule window theory. He suggests maybe the assassin could have swung out of that unbarred window and somehow acrobatically managed to pull the heavy iron shutters closed and fasten them from the outside.
That sounds incredibly difficult, almost impossible, especially if wounded.
Larsan himself admits it's a stretch. He also considers the possibility of scaling the outside of the pavilion, maybe getting up to the attic somehow. But he immediately undercuts his own theories by acknowledging Rouletabille's point about the wound. He says these athletic feats might be possible, if only he had not been wounded in the hand. That hand wound makes any complex physical escape seem highly improbable.
Does he go back to blaming the staff, old Jacques and the concierges?
He considers Professor Stangerson's own theory that Jacques and the Berniers must have helped, maybe quickly closing the vestibule shutters after the assassin jumped out, while everyone was distracted by breaking down the yellow room door.
But Larsan rejects that too.
Ultimately, yes. He finds their denials too sincere, their shock too genuine. Plus, logically, he points out they were right there at the threshold of the yellow room when the door finally burst open. They wouldn't have the time or the position to simultaneously help someone escape from the vestibule window and refasten the shutters without being seen.
So, after all the investigation, all the theories, Larsan is basically back to square one.
Pretty much. The physical evidence of the sealed room clashes with the physical evidence of the assassin's presence and subsequent escape. Rouletabille's wound theory complicates any simple physical exit. Larsan's accomplice-free theories run into logical hurdles with the shutters or the required acrobatics. The locked room remains stubbornly locked, metaphorically speaking. The paradox holds.
Wow. What a journey. We've really taken a deep dive into just a labyrinth of logic, haven't we? A crime that seems to defy physics itself.
It's truly monumental. We've dissected the scene, the clues, the bloody handprint, the bizarre sheep's bone weapon, those conflicting footprints by the lake. It's a forensic puzzle box.
And seeing the clash between the two main investigators, Larsan, the experienced professional, relying on procedure and established logic, versus Rouletabille, the young genius, using pure observation and radical deduction, it's fascinating how they kept undermining each other's conclusions.
Absolutely. Larsan trying to force the facts into a solvable, albeit potentially complex, physical explanation, while Rouletabille seems willing to follow the logic, even when it leads to seemingly contradictory places, like suspecting Darzac and then declaring him innocent.
And you can see why this case just gripped the public imagination, why it became such a benchmark. It wasn't just who did it, but how it could possibly have been done. That impossibility is the hook.
Definitely. It really highlights how meticulous observation, like Rouletabille's focus on hair or the wound, can sometimes shatter the assumptions of standard investigation.
Yeah.
But it also shows how deeply human factors, secrets, fear, that sudden, unexplained change of heart from Mademoiselle Stangerson can twist a case in ways pure forensics can't easily unravel.
We started this whole thing talking about the initial reaction, people thinking it had to be the devil, the supernatural. But where we've ended up is, well, it's buried deep in human secrecy, isn't it?
Exactly. Rouletabille himself said it, even after seemingly cornering Darzac. The whole affair seems more entangled than ever, but I have an idea. My idea is one that involves the life or death of two persons at least. That's incredibly ominous.
It really is. Which brings us to that final lingering question. Mademoiselle Stangerson's sudden refusal to marry Darzac, her cryptic excuse about being too old, the sheer violence of the attack, it all seems to point back to some core secret.
Given how intertwined the Stangersons and Darzac were, professionally and personally, the provocation we want to leave you with is this. What underlying secret was Mademoiselle Stangerson protecting, possibly with her life? A secret so profound it made her reject the man she supposedly loved, and perhaps triggered this impossible assault. And how might identifying that secret finally reveal the identity of the person who walked out of a sealed room?
That hidden motive feels like the only key left that could unlock the Yellow Room. Something to ponder. Until next time, keep asking questions.
And keep diving deep.